The big clash of round 1 of the candidates 2022 was between the two Americans. Fabiano Caruana had the white pieces against Hikaru Nakamura. On one hand, you have Caruana, who is extremely serious about chess, prepares very hard, harbors the dream of becoming a world champion. And on the other, you have Hikaru Nakamura, who says that he's no longer a professional chess player. He is a streamer, he's a full-time streamer, but he plays amazing chess and won the FIDE Grand Prix recently. Everyone was keen to see how Caruana and Nakamura would fare against each other, and so the game began with 1 e4. Fabi was white, he opens with e4. Nakamura goes very solid with e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. We have the Ruy Lopez, knight f6, the Berlin. And now Fabi says, no Berlin for me, it is the anti-Berlin with d3. Bishop comes out to c5, you take on c6, pawn takes c6, and notice that white cannot win this pawn here on e5 because of the queen d4 trick attacking the knight and f2. So Caruana went knight bd2, bishop e6, castles, and now the e5 pawn is hanging, so the bishop drops back to d6. Another possible way to defend e5 was knight to d7. He went bishop d6, and now this move knight b3 was played here. If we look at our the number of games played here, the main move here has been b3, and after that also played here has been d4. But knight b3 is something that has been mastered by Ray Robson, and also Wesley So has played it, MVL, Dominguez, Ivan Saric. So a lot of good players have played it. One of the ideas of this move is to prepare the knight to go to a5. For example, if black tries to go a5 here, that is quite possible. But then maybe white can try for the d4 idea here in a much more favorable circumstance. Okay, so queen e7 was played. And now Fabi went knight a5, and he was clearly expecting from the game between Robson and Dominguez that black will long castle, and then it leads to very sharp game. I think Caruana would have improved over it. Maybe a3 is the move that engines prefer with b4 coming up. But instead, he went rook to b8. And here, I think Caruana was of the opinion that if you anyway wanted to play rook b8, then why not castle here and then knight a5, rook b8, when castling is more useful than queen e7. Okay, so queen e7, knight a5, rook b8, bishop to g5. This is a good move, pinning the knight, h6, bishop h4, and now that black has not castled, he goes for g5. Bishop comes back to g3, attacking the pawn on e4, e5, and there came knight d7, defending it. And now it was Caruana's turn to play in the center. He breaks with d4. Very logical chess. Because the king is still in the center, you want to break it open. f6 was played, and I think at this point is where Caruana was not happy with his decision that he made in the game. He played the move queen to d3. A very interesting move here was c3, because after h5 you can play the move h4, and if g4 now, which is not a good move, then black has the intermediate idea of d takes e5. And this idea you should keep in mind, because if fe5 you can jump with your knight. By the way, the knight cannot be taken because the bishop is hanging. And if you take with the knight here, I can take on e5, or I can even go knight d4, and white is better here. So c3, h4, I think bishop g4 can be played, and here the position is slightly better for white. But in the game, Caruana played queen d3, and maybe he didn't want to come in that pin with bishop g4. That could have been one of the reasons that he's playing. But now after h5, he didn't want to play h4. Now here's the question to you which is coming up, that after g4, d takes e5, why is this not the best move in the position? Like, you know, last time we saw fe5, there is knight g5. If you take on e5, I can take it back, or I can play knight I mean, not knight d4, my queen is hanging, but I can take on e5. But what is the move here that black has? So black has the move bishop b4 here. Excellent. This was your first point in the game. And the main point is that now this knight is hanging and so is this knight. So let's say after e takes f6, queen f6. Now I try to save my knight, bishop a5. Black is doing well. Okay, white has compensation with f4, but it's not an advantage. So here d takes e5 was played in the game, and then after knight e5, Caruana decided to take with the bishop here. He could have taken with the knight, pawn takes queen c3, but after queen g7, it seems like the e5 is defended and black is the one who's taking over the initiative here. So that's the reason why bishop e5 was played, fe5, and now came the move knight c4, attacking e5. Hikaru could have taken this knight, queen takes g4, knight e1 with the idea of knight d3. It seems like the position is very slightly better for white, but after king d7, it's not like that. Now the rook comes here, then the king moves back. Black seems to be doing pretty well. So rook d8 was played, and now this was a nice move actually. I liked it because now knight takes e5, bishop e5 just unleashes an attack on the queen. So tactically defended the e5 point, knight d6, cd6, and queen e3. Double attack here and here, but first the knight is attacked with g4, knight d2, and a6 was played. Here Fabi played a move that really impressed everyone. And also Caruana later said that this was a psychological move that he put up. He knew that black can either castle or play king d7, king c7, or king c8. And he wasn't afraid of castles because these pawns are weak. But he was afraid of the king going here. So that's the reason why he decided to play the move b3. And it is a more of a psychological move. Because if king d7, maybe he wanted to prepare knight c4, when after take the b file has opened up and could become dangerous. And I think Nakamura also sort of got tricked here and he short castled, which was a kind of shocking move for everyone, because why would you short castle? You can even go rook g8, you can keep your king in the center. There are many ways you can prepare queen g5. But when he played short castles, the game had turned around. And now it's your move here as white for your second point. What do you play here? White to play. It is clear that you must open up the position, but in what way is important. Don't play f4, because there after takes, rook f8, let's say I move my queen to h6, queen f6, attacking the rook and the queen, the game is equal now. So that's the reason why f3 is the correct move, and full point to you if you found it. Now the king starts to get really worried here on king g8. Queen g7 was played, take, rook a d1, and now Nakamura had to play rook d7 and keep the position, try to fight. White is better, but he goes d5. He just opens, first his king is open, then he opens the center. This is becoming a bit too much. At this point, Magnus Carlsen tweeted saying that he literally doesn't care about his king. That literally doesn't care is Nakamura's favorite statement that he had made once. Here takes, and now came the move rook d e1, attacking the pawn on e5. So e4 was played, and now Fabi took, and here's your third point. What do you play here as white? White to move. Very powerful move played by white. So the move that is extremely strong here is c4, breaking the center, and it's completely winning for white now. I mean, huge advantage. Let's say if you take on c4, then I will first take on e4, attacking your bishop, then taking on c4 with the knight. So rook e8 was played, but after take, once again a nice little move played by white, which was knight f1. So the knight can now jump to g3 or even e3 better, and that's what he wanted. Queen e5, queen h6, making way for the knight to come to e3. Queen g7, avoiding the key queen trade. It's an important thing here. Knight to e3, g3 was played, and here is the position where you should think for your fourth point. What do you do here as white? So you might want to play knight to f5, but after g takes h2, king h1, let's imagine, queen g5, somehow black is hanging on. In these positions, what I realized after analyzing a lot is that in some variations black is able to hold, in some variations white is breaking through. It is very specific because the black king is weak. You cannot have like generalized themes, but one thing is that white wants to coordinate all three of his pieces into the attack. And so here the right move was rook f1, g takes h2 and king h1, because now the three pieces are coordinating very well. Knight is coming to f5. So let's say for example rook f8, I go in with my knight, queen g5, and now comes this move rook to f4. Very strong move. So that if after e3, now try to find this move, what should white do? Very nice little move. Yeah, just rook g4. You also have queen e6, which would work somehow, because if rook f7, you have knight h6, king can't go to g7, and if you go to the h file, you have rook h4. So there are ways to win, but rook g4 is very clean, takes and knight h6, and if rook f5, then take check, and you win the rook. So these were some of the lines, but after h takes g3 was played in the game, queen e5. One thing that Fabi must not do is exchange queens. So he kept the queens on the board, but here they were nearing move 40. So queen takes g3 and now rook f1. So he has managed to coordinate everything. Again, don't trade the queen, and here queen h5 would have won, because you keep an eye on this rook and you are preparing knight f5. So even if bishop d7, knight f5 still comes in, you can't take with the bishop because your rook is hanging and white is winning here. But queen h4 was slightly inaccurate, because after offering a trade, now once again Fabi had to go queen f4. This was move number 40, and then he is better here clearly. But what he did was he went queen g3, queen g7, and now queen h4. When after move 40, Hikaru took his time and found this move, bishop d7. Excellent move, stopping now knight g4, knight f5, and somehow you are able to, like, knight d5 is still not coming because of queen d4 check, and it doesn't work. And knight f5 somehow is also not working, because after rook f5 comes the move rook e5, and black is still, I mean, white is better here, but he has to find all these moves where his king comes up and he manages to win. But rook d1 was a nice move, and here black had to go rook e7, knight d5, rook f7, when there are good defensive chances, but he went bishop e6, and this was a mistake. And now for your last point in this game, fifth point, what do you play here as white to play? This time knight d5 works, because now if you take, I take, now rook g5 is threatened, and now rook e5 is not possible because of rook d8 check. So notice how the rook shifting from f5 to d5 has helped white. So here he did not take on d5, he went rook f8, but then he took on e4, pawn up, queen h6, again a strong move, rook e1, and as you see now the pieces have coordinated, check, king here, knight to f5, queen f6, and rook f1, final shot, and now check, king g7, and queen takes queen g4 check. Is just winning. Queen is hanging, so you have to block, but then comes a check. Now the king can go to the f file or the h file. If it goes to the h file, then I have queen h4 picking up the rook with a check, so there's no mate on g2, and king f7 with knight h4 picking up the queen here. So that's how this ended, and Caruana managed to win. I hope you were able to think like Caruana in those 5 moments that I asked you, and Fabi takes the lead in the candidates with winning the first game along with Nepo. The 2 others ended in a draw. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Bye bye.